Welcome everyone to our latest edition of Inspirational Double Acts. I'm thrilled to be joined by the Kimches from Jerusalem, Rabbi Alan Avia Kimche, Rebetzin Avia Kimche. For those, if anyone doesn't know them, this is the story of Ner Yisrael Shul in Hendon, the community, and so much more. And recently, London's loss was clearly Jerusalem's gain. Thank you very much for joining me. I guess probably the best place to start is just your backgrounds and then the story of Ner Yisrael.
Thank you. Good evening, Daniel. Very nice to see you. And it's a pleasure to be part of your program. We came on Aliyah a couple of years ago when I was living in Yerushalayim. But for 35 years, we were Rav and Rebetzin of the Ner Yisrael community in Hendon. And I'm sure quite a few of your viewers occasionally came to see us and know us from that context. Prior to that, I'd actually lived in Israel for about years as a yeshiva bacher, been learning in yeshiva and kollel, and then afterwards I went to university in London and I took a degree in philosophy, and we got married, and we actually spent our first few married years in Yerushalayim. So coming on Aliyah recently has been really a coming back to Yerushalayim. But in Yerushalayim, I was learning here and teaching, and so was my wife, learning and teaching here. And but in 1984, the real story starts, Daniel. In 1984, we came back to London, and we started what we thought was going to be a tiny little minyan in Hendon. We started something which was, we started it from nothing. Just really a dozen balabatim got together in what was then Jews College, and we started a Shabbos minyan. And the most remarkable thing about that project was that in retrospect, we can see clearly it was a project which was blessed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Wow. It was a time of blessing, it was a time of bracha. It was a project which really just was something that the community needed at that time.
I must say that I feel it was the right thing at the right time. It was a shul, or it started with the request of a few balabatim. Back in his,
it's not important the names.
Just to give context, 1984 was a year before I was born. So this is a real generation,
yes.
Generation gap, but generation joiner.
Yeah, Shastas, etc. Lots of lovely, wonderful people. And I think at that time, London had a very clear sort of demarcations in terms of community life. There was, of course, the United Synagogue, which did a fantastic job. There was, of course, the more Haredi communities, more the Adas Yisrael communities, and there was nothing really in between. And I think Ner Yisrael was the right thing at the right time. That was one of the reasons, I think, why it succeeded so well. And of course, what you always have said, the fantastic team of Balabatim who put that together, and
so it was really the idea, the original vision was to build something, for lack of a better word, it's a difficult concept, difficult to label this, but what's sometimes called modern Orthodox Judaism is a word that is often misused and abused. I don't like to use it so much. But in America, for example, the Young Israel movement of communities, which are both completely Orthodox, but at the same time, more modern, more pro-Zionistic, and more encouraging for higher education and worldly engagement. That was the vision, which was different to the United Synagogue in the sense that all our membership were completely Shomer Shabbos and sending their kids to Jewish schools. And at the same time, we were very much, as I say, more engaging in the modern world. So we started off with a small group, but the shul mushroomed very, very quickly. Very quickly, we'd outgrown Jews College within a year. Wow. And again, we had the muzzle, the hashgacha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to find a building in Hendon which perfectly suited our needs. So in 1986, we moved from Jews College into the building which is still today Ner Yisrael.
Wow. And then it was just building. I guess
it was building. So let me tell you a little bit about what the uniqueness of the community and how we work together, my wife and I, in creating really new ideas and new projects which had previously really never ever taken off in Northwest London to the same degree. So, for example, we had adult education learning programs, which were became very popular. Maybe my wife would say a few words about her initiative to run a ladies' learning program.
Yes, so basically it was in 1986, 1987 that we opened what we called the Jewish Learning Center, and it was actually in conjunction with the United Synagogues, whatever, higher education, learning adult education program. And for a whole day, we had a variety of lectures and teachers and a crash. You see, that was the point. Until then, that had never happened, that there was a crash, that women with children, young children, could come and learn. And it was a lot of texture learning, which also was a bit of an innovation at the time, because until then, most women's shiurim were, people gave a talk and you went home and were inspired, but that was also there, but it was also very much text focused, and it was lovely. And that set off, I think, a series of other daytime learning programs, but that was not the only thing.
So there was also, for example, we innovated a Tikkun Leil. The Shavuos night learning in London was very much an activity for old men who set up all night learning together, but there was no electricity about it. There was no buzz about it. So we, from the very beginning, put together a very ambitious Tikkun Leil program on Shavuos night, which everybody thought was absolutely crazy. And we had several different shiurim running all through the night for youth, for women, for a Beis HaMedrash program, for Chavrusas. We had speakers, we invited speakers from all over the place. And that was a real groundbreaker. That was something which had never happened before.
It's just amazing that some of these things, I guess that the measure of success is when 20 years later you look back and say, how could a shul have ever existed without this?
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
These are bread and butter things, but yeah, the time to hear that's innovative.
It wasn't, and there was another very big thing that was the Tish Above program that Neistel innovated. It was the Balabatzim.
At that time in Northwest, there wasn't really.
People just sat at home and were sad, and so Nair opened.
So we transformed Tish Above in two different ways. First of all, the morning kinnis. We didn't say all the kinnis. We only said selected kinnis. And we had 4 or 5 different balabatim. We told them a couple of months in advance to prepare a 5 or 10 minute talk about one of the kinnis. And they got up and explained it and what it was and what it meant and who wrote it and what the point of it was. And so that the kinnis say, and that's true to this day at Ner Yisrael, that Tish Above kinnis morning is a very meaningful event. It's a seminar on using the texts.
Right.
The second thing was the Tish Above afternoon we transformed into a Holocaust memorial event.
There were speakers and there was a film always usually focused on around the Holocaust, which of course is the main churban in our or the previous generation mostly remembered. There are still survivors and there was always a survivor giving testimony or an interview, which is very, very meaningful. And then there also was a shir afterwards, mincha with tefillin and a shir, and it was actually really an amazing and
I remember one of the early years of Tish Above, Rabbi Lord Jacobovitz was still the chief rabbi, and we invited him to give the talk in the last 45 minutes of Tish Above after the whole program had taken place. And he walked into the shul like an hour before the end of Tish Above, and it was standing room only. And he could not believe that Tish Above, the shul, was standing room only. He said, he walked in, he said to me, gosh, he says, it looks like a Ne'ilah. It looks like a Yom Kippur service here. He said, I said, we've been full the whole afternoon for the last 4 or 5 hours. It's been full because we've had interesting speakers, interesting films, survivors giving their own personal reminiscences, and lots of people were very, very interested. He spoke beautifully, Rabbi Lord Jacobovitz. We've also had Rabbi Sachs a couple of times, Zechron Livracha, coming to speak. We had guest speakers coming in to speak in the last half an hour of Tish Above, which was it was innovative. No one had ever done that before.
Right.
But there was a lot of criticism at the time. Whatever we did new was totally criticized at the beginning. And now what you say is everybody's doing it. Right. Because they realized there was talk that they transformed Ner into a cinema on Tish Above and blah, blah, blah. How terrible, okay, never mind. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the other very big project of NER was the Eruv, of course. That was really started by my husband and NER Balabatim, that was spearheaded. And Baruch Hashem, after 15 years of fights and lawsuits and quite a lot of difficulties, Baruch Hashem, it came into being in 2003, Parshas Matzos Maseh. And it was very special. It was amazing. It was actually too late for my children to push them in a buggy. But I hope that the whole community has greatly benefited
enormously, yes. Yes.
I'm sure they definitely have. Can I then just ask, in terms of NER, so you said it started in 1984 in one venue with about 12 families or so, and now or before you left is what? And the second part of that is how did that work for you? And you joined a small shul, which I guess it was only a limited amount of time that you were spending on it, presumably, and then suddenly it blossoms into a gigantic community.
Yes.
So how did that work in terms of your own lives? That's
Right.
more involved and more shy.
It was a revolution in our lives. It started off as a small community. The truth is, within 6 months already, it was about 50 families. And by the time we moved in 1986, like a year and a half later, we had over 100 families. Mm-hmm. So it was already a substantial, and you must understand that these people who were joining our shul, many of them were 7 days a week shul people. In other words, they weren't coming just on Yom Tov or just on Shabbos. There was on Shabbos, everybody was there, but during the week, we had lots of minyanim during the week as well, and shiurim during the week. So it was a very active, committed community. My wife was teaching the women, gave women's shiurim regularly. I gave lots of shiurim. One of the innovative projects that we had also was celebrity guest speakers. For some reason, other shuls hadn't really picked up on this. That there are in the world dozens and dozens of really top-class English-speaking celebrities, either rabbonim or professors of Jewish studies, or authors of books, right? And what we did was we put together a program every year of looking for speakers, and we got them sponsored. In other words, Balabatim in the shul sponsored every speaker. Cost, I don't know, £1,000 to fly him over and give him a fee, or more than that. And people were eager to sponsor guest speakers, and this made a massive difference.
Over Shavuos, we had
every Shavuos we had guest speakers, and during the year we had guest speakers. One of the most important guest speakers we had there was Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, Zechrono Livrach.
He was my primary school principal.
Was he really?
Yes.
The Rabbi Isaac Bernstein, Zechrono Livrach, was a very good friend of mine. When he passed away, it was a big blow to me personally and to the whole shul. And so he was the Rav of Kinlos, but when it came to giving a shul, we invited him to go and give a weekly parsha shir in our shul, and that shir really took off like a rocket.
Many hundreds of
people came every week.
We couldn't believe it. Hundreds.
I mean, the recordings are still available, right?
Yeah.
But that was actually an important part of building. It put Ner Yisrael on the map. Rabbi Bernstein's shir put Ner Yisrael on the map in the early years because people came from all over London to hear him speak. He was an amazing orator, an educator, and a Talmud Chacham, and really a special person.
So just numbers-wise, Ner now or at the time you left was.
When we left, it has today somewhere about 450 families.
Amazing.
And that is really paying members. There are lots of people who use the shul without being paying members, whether they're students or Israelis who have a minhag not to pay membership. There are lots of different people who come to shul regularly, but doesn't occur to them to pay membership. But whatever it is, the shul today, on Shabbos morning, when we left, the Shabbos morning, we had 5 separate minyanim running.
Besides for the children's services, yeah.
5 separate besides the children's services.
There's also very important that the base, the London base, where the students learn in the evening, has been at Ner for very many years.
So 1991. It was 1991 that Rabbi Bernstein and myself and Rabbi Ginsburg, one of the few people got together, and Rabbi Sachs at the time got together.
No, but it was an initiative of the young students.
It was an initiative of the students, but we took it and created the evening base, which to this day, we're talking about 30 years later, is still really rocking. You're probably familiar with it.
I know it very, very well.
You're teaching there now, aren't you?
Yeah, but in the evenings,
Fantastic.
yeah. Give a shirim.
So how many students are there now in the evenings about?
Well, now it's Corona time.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay. You get over the course of a week, you'll have 75 or something, coming in and learning.
It's fantastic.
Amazing.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we hosted also the base of Hasmo base in the morning.
In the morning, right.
That was unbelievable for me. I often came in during the week to sit with Louise, our fantastic CEO, I would say. I don't like to call her secretary, but she isn't, because she really has she organizes lots of things and she's fantastic. And I often used to come in and I saw this roaring base medrash, this whole big shul full of boys and their rebellion. It was magnificent. It was unbelievable. I was very sorry when they left, I must tell you, but okay. That was a highlight for me, absolutely. Anyway.
Amazing. Right. So just coming back to the teamwork element and how that changed. So again, we have a shul, 1984, 12, 15 families. Suddenly it's 50. It's gone incrementally to 500 or so. What did that mean for you? And also tips in terms of both working together personally, if I can ask and be too intrusive, and also like how to cultivate a team around you. So let's start with the changes. Just time-wise and organization, it must have taken a lot of time.
Originally we had another job, and then the job.
Yes. So initially it wasn't a full-time job, but after it became a full-time job at a certain point in the 1990s. There were so many different aspects to the rabbinic work, which had demands on me. But honestly, building a kehillah is a job for a rabbi and a Rebetzin as a team. You can't build a kehillah without a rabbi and a Rebetzin, because the Rebetzin, my wife really was involved in building the social side of a community. A community is not just about davening and learning. Davening and learning was more my domain, but social events, even like the Tish Above event and Lava Malkas event and various other simchas of various sorts, my wife was very hands-on. And the social event is really the cement that holds the community together. I mean, the purpose of a community may well be the davening and the learning, but the community together, the feel-good factor, is often generated by the Rebetzin, and that's what my wife was extremely good at.
That's nice. Thank you.
There we go.
That's the first lesson of teamwork then. The compliments.
Very, very nice. I must say that I think also that the team of Balabatim over all the years has been fantastic, because everything was a teamwork. It's true that my husband led the community, but it was very much done in coordination with, and there were lots of ideas were bounced back and forth, and then together, I would say with the team, we did it all together. Now, if you're asking me how it impacted on the family, because that is a very interesting one. Are you interested in that?
Go for it.
So one of our things we felt was important was trying to invite people from the community to have them over for Shabbos meals. And that's like an open house. So I know that now that has become much more common, but it wasn't very common when we started. And we always thought, oh gosh, maybe the kids don't like it very much, but they did like it. And I hope they haven't got a complex from being the rabbi's children. I don't think so, because we did absolutely spend private time with them. There were some times which are absolutely cordoned off for the family use, and we went on good family holidays, or only a cottage in the countryside usually, except sometimes we went to Israel, but usually it was like that. So there were some very good family times, and the kids really knew that we were for them. But of course, a communal life is a communal life. And when they were growing up, they said, oh, we'll never do what you're doing, blah, blah. And then it turns out that lots of them are doing what we're doing. So who knows, whatever.
Wow.
They don't seem too scarred.
Right. No, I know many of them.
My wife mentioned before the project of the Eruv. I must tell you, if you're thinking about one of the highlights of my time at Ner Yisrael, was fighting that battle for the Eruv. I felt that building an Eruv in Northwest London would be a game changer in the whole area and would be a model for other areas in London to follow. But we had enormous opposition from every side, mainly from Barnet Council. Our main problem was Barnet Council. We also had opposition from some extreme Haredi elements, but that was more annoying rather than actually an obstacle, because we didn't really need their agreement for the simple reason that the London Bezdin had signed off completely on this project. So it was going to be a London Bezdin project. So it didn't matter that other communities didn't like it so much. The problem was the Barnet Council were determined not to let us build this area. You've got no idea the levels of anti-Semitism and hostility that we encountered in Barnet Council. Was absolutely shocking to us. And I must tell you, at the very end, I could speak about for hours about this, but just one more minute on this. At the end, Barnet Council decided, we are never going to allow you to build an Eruv. And what we had to do is we had to take them to court, what is called a judicial review of a planning judicial review with a judge and with witnesses and with a QC. It cost us a lot of money, and we accused them of anti-Semitism. And the judge agreed with us, and the judge forced them to give us permission. Wow. And that was really a tremendous game changer for the whole Jewish community in Northwest London, in the whole of the UK, yeah. That it became normal. It became normal that a community who is Shomer Shabbos wants to build an Eruv, and by doing so, you facilitate mothers with small children, elderly, disabled people, that the benefits are phenomenal. So that was one of the great achievements, really, of the community. And I was running it, I was running the program, but I had a wonderful Eruv committee. As my wife mentioned earlier, one of the secrets of the success of Bnei Yisrael was the teamwork of the lay leadership. Was really outstanding. And my wife was very much involved in this, in the sense that in order to create a teamwork, we invited them to our house with their families, their wives and children. We got to know them. And there was a feeling that we're in this together, right? That the rabbi and the lay leadership were really a genuine team. And that was one of the great secrets.
Amazing. The Eruv totally resonates. I was a teenager at the time. I remember it wasn't such a game changer when I was a teenager, but of course when I got married and with kids, it's a massive game changer. I can see it's Toton, Edgware and Stanmore, which were the next kind of, the next generation Eruv, so to speak. It's a total, you're right, it's a total, and we're very grateful. We really are. Look, I can just see the time ticking away. Just in the last minute or so, tips. I think this is especially pertinent nowadays. Some relationships can be strained due to the pressures and stresses of COVID. Teamwork tips, especially, let's say, if there are differences of opinion, whether that's in a shul, whether that's in a community, how to kind of smooth them over, how to deal with differences, and tips for getting along even when they're heightened stress.
Okay, my husband is a master at this. I really mean it. He will always say, okay, let's listen to what your position is. And then I'd like you to listen to what my position is. Let's find a good way, a good pshar. Let's find a good compromise, and let's work together. We're in it together. He really is unbelievable. He can make, he always has a very big picture in mind. What is the ultimate objective? We're not fighting with each other. We're not competing. We're trying to work together, complement each other to achieve the same goal. So this is your opinion, this is my opinion. Let's work together, a bit of this and a bit of that, and that way you'll work well. And what is very important is to not insult each other, ever. Really very important. And to realize that you're both working, that you're in the same boat together, that you're not trying to, it's never a one-upmanship. It's giving each other space, it's giving each other covet, honor, and listening to what the other person has to say. I think that is really very, very important. Amazing. What do you say?
Absolutely. I think we actually worked out a very good formula. I was always of the opinion that there's always more than one route to reach your objective. It's not, you think of one route and you think that's the route. The answer is it's a route to reach the objective. Let's try, maybe there are other routes which have different pros, different alternative benefits, which we haven't thought of yet. So my wife and I often sat down together and worked it out and discussed things, and we only grew from it. And we discussed it with the other members of the community. And generally, those 35 years, we look back on as really blessed years, where Baruch Hashem, our children grew and got married, and bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs, and the
We saw
community.
whole generations getting married, and we
mushrooms.
saw also their children getting married. That is very special. My husband did a few chuppahs like this, you know, of the parents, and then the next generation, which is amazing. I think perhaps one small thing, but is very, very important, is in any disagreement, please try and reduce your own ego. Don't feel in this, oh, I am at stake. It's not true. If you want to achieve something together, do it together, take a little step back. And, you know, I think that really is very much.
I'd just like to add at the end, the cherry on top for me at Ner Yisrael was Rabbi Eliezer Zobin. That in the last couple of years of my work at Ner Yisrael, I was wondering, would I ever manage to go on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael? And I knew I would never leave the community unless I found someone who had all the qualities necessary to really take it forward into the next generation. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu introduced me to Rabbi Eliezer Zobin, who has taken over from me. And the transition was extremely smooth. And he's the most wonderful, gifted, talented, knowledgeable young rabbi Ner Yisrael could have. And we're still in touch, and we've become good friends, and we discuss things together still to this very day. So that was, for me, the cherry on top. That was the moment when the journey that we went through those years came to its conclusion, but also had a future.
Amazing. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. I know you're in Yerushalayim. We're here currently in London, but look, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you very much for your time. We really, really do appreciate it.
You totally should be blessed in your work.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you.
All the very best to you.
Wonderful. It's
bye-bye.
Wonderful.